Welcome, friends, to another edition of More Bad News, brought to you, as always, by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camels Challenge, smoke Camels for 30 days, and see for yourself what a difference Camels can make in your life. My friends, looking back at a time when more doctors smoked Camels, we realized just how delusional we were back then. We used to think that tobacco was good for you and marijuana was bad for you. Now, we think that marijuana is medicine and tobacco is poison. But think just for one moment about our present delusions in which tobacco is bad for you, but COVID is just another respiratory disease and Donald Trump is the Republican Party, the guy who controls Congress and can block the bills to fund our favorite wars. Seriously, are we better off now than we were when more doctors smoked Camels? Well, friends, it's been another week of very bad news. Putin is deploying weapons in space. It wasn't clear what those weapons were, but any weapons in low Earth orbit is very bad news. This is the worst news since Marjorie Taylor Greene exposed the menace of Jewish space lasers. And then there were the elections in Indonesia. Although not widely reported in the American media, Indonesia is the most populous nation in Southeast Asia and the third largest democracy in the world, just behind India and the United States. Indonesia is also the world's largest Muslim nation. We don't pay much attention to Indonesia, especially when the big news is the Super Bowl and Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. But last week's elections did not go well for democracy. The controversial former general Prabowo Prabo, excuse me for a moment, Prabioso Subiendo was elected president. He was an army general under his father-in-law Suharto, the military dictator who served as Indonesia's second president from 1968 to 1998. He was in charge of Indonesia's brutal suppression in East Timor. In 1976, Indonesia officially annexed East Timor, which led to a brutal 24-year guerrilla warfare, during which over 183,000 East Timorese died of violence, hunger, and disease. He has been accused of crimes against humanity, of abducting pro-democracy activists, and falsely claiming victory in two previous elections. He has openly declared that Indonesia needs an authoritarian ruler, and he's determined to end direct elections of regional leaders. Closer to home, we're worrying about the fate of our own democracy in the face of Trump's complete control of the Republican Party. There's all sorts of concern for the future, but the present moment, Trump is in control not only of the Republican Party, but of the US Congress. Trump may not be president, but he calls the shots. No border deal, no money to fund our favorite wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Our European allies and NATO, in fact, all of our allies have come to understand that the US is no longer a stable partner for global governance. The situation in the Middle East continues to deteriorate with no sign of hope anywhere. Our own military is now engaging in fighting in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Also in the news was the death of Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Putin's fiercest foe. He died on Friday in his Arctic penal colony where he was serving a 19-year sentence. He was 47 years old. All in all, last week was more bad news for democracy. The Economist reported that on February 14th, Trump and Biden were neck and neck in the polls, with Trump leading by a few points. It takes one's breath away. He dominates the news, dominates the Republican Party, dominates the Congress, destabilizes NATO, continually compares himself to Al Capone, one of the most notorious mob bosses in US history. And despite being convicted of sexual assault and business fraud, he is still our man in the Republican Party. And finally, we have new guidelines from the CDC, which last week moved to stop treating COVID as a unique respiratory disease. It no longer matters if you're contagious. If you can get your ass out of bed, it's okay to go to work. New York, the last remaining state to mandate paid leave for COVID isolation, is considering ending the benefit this summer. Well, that's all for this week, folks. Remember, time is running out to take the Camels Challenge. You want to have at least a month to discover the difference that camels can make in your life. And the number of months ahead of us is quickly running out. That's all for this week. Stay safe, and hopefully See you next week with more bad news.